They told stories, old, strange stories, about a species that once challenged the void. Whispers passed between stars and civilizations about creatures made of blood and bone who tamed planets, moved mountains, and stared death in the face without blinking. They were called humans, and the younger species laughed. Folklore. Ghosts from before the records began. The elders, the archivists, the scarred veterans of long-forgotten wars, they didn't laugh. They didn't smile either. The myth said humans had disappeared over 1,000 cycles ago. Wiped out. Burnt. Forgotten. But if that were true, why did the fear remain in the oldest minds? Why were there still planets marked as forbidden by human treaty in the Galactic Codex? No one had ever found a real one. Not a body. Not a working vessel. Not a single artifact that wasn't rusted through or hollowed by time. Until today. The station was small, barely large enough to classify as a listening post. Perched on the edge of a dead system in the Orion Drift, it had gone silent 2 cycles ago. No distress signal. No damage report. Just silence. A recovery crew was dispatched. They weren't soldiers. Just a small team of engineers and analysts. Their orders were simple: assess, repair, and report. What they found should have been a broken relay. A burnt-out coil. A solar flare-fried terminal. Something technical. Logical. Normal. Instead, the doors opened to silence. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just dust. And one terminal, still glowing. Not flickering. Not cracked. Glowing. It was an old model, ancient by today's standards, likely predating the last 10 generations of core tech. And yet it worked. Not only that, it was active, looping one message in a language that hadn't been spoken aloud in over 1,000 years. The translation program struggled. The dialect was harsh, fast, emotional. Too emotional. Machines didn't talk like that. And after hours of decoding, the full message emerged. This is not a distress call. This is not a warning. If you're reading this, you've already opened the box. And now we're awake. The youngest member of the crew, a linguist barely out of training, laughed nervously. It's just a remnant. Something someone programmed for fun. Theater. But the engineer with trembling hands disagreed. He knew the stories. He had a grandmother who spoke about the last silence. She once told him there were things in the stars best left undisturbed. If you ever find something still alive after 1,000 years, she'd whispered, run? He didn't run. None of them did. Curiosity. That was the weakness of the living. In the lowest level of the station, far below the core, was a sealed chamber. Locked. No access logs. No records. Just an old door made of black composite, covered in markings no one could translate. It wasn't tech. It was art. And it wasn't locked from the outside. They should have left it sealed. Every instinct screamed that. Every nerve in the crew's bodies itched with ancient warning. But pride is louder than fear when it's wearing a uniform and carrying credentials. They opened it. The chamber was a capsule, cold, metallic, empty, except for one thing. A chair. And in that chair sat a figure, humanoid but wrong. It was asleep. Or dead. Or something between. There were no cables, no feeds, no lights, no support system. Just that single chair and the being who shouldn't exist. Its skin was pale, not white, not gray, pale like silence. Its clothing was worn leather, stitched by hand. No tags. No insignias. No military code. And its face looked human. Not the stylized renderings from historical databases. Not the exaggerated features passed down in myths or alien dreams. Just a face. Tired. Peaceful. Real. The linguist stepped forward first, eyes wide with wonder. It's a reconstruction. A model. Someone built this, maybe humans themselves, before they vanished. Or maybe, the engineer said quietly, they never vanished at all. Before they could run scans, the lights in the chamber dimmed. Not failed. Dim. As if the space itself knew what was happening. As if it was breathing. Then came the sound. Not loud. Not sudden. Just there. A low hum like the memory of a war drum. Faint at first, then crawling deeper into their bones. Instruments failed. HUDs flickered. One crew member collapsed, eyes rolling, blood seeping from their ears. The thing in the chair opened its eyes. Blue. Not the sterile blue of artificial optics. The blue of oceans. Of storms. Alive. Awake. Angry. And then it spoke. Not with sound, but with thought. Heavy. Focused. Human. You've forgotten. The linguist screamed. The rest staggered back, grabbing at weapons that wouldn't help. None of them could explain how they knew what it meant, but they did. Each word hit like a memory long buried. "Who are you?" someone managed to say aloud. The answer was a whisper inside all of them. "We are what comes after silence. You called us myth. We call you death." They ran. But outside the chamber, everything had changed. The station no longer matched schematics. Hallways twisted. Corridors that should have led to the hangar opened into rooms they hadn't entered. Doors sealed behind them. Lights flickered in rhythm, pulsing like a heartbeat. And on every wall, screens came alive with images that shouldn't exist. Old Earth. Not simulations. Not artist renderings. Real footage. Skies thick with aircraft. Oceans boiling with fleets. Cities rising and falling in flames and light. Humans, millions of them, fighting, building, loving, falling, rising again. Laughing. The myth wasn't dead. It had just gone quiet. The final recording came from a place none of the crew recognized. A barren landscape under a red sun. One man standing alone in ruined armor, eyes scorched but unyielding, looking straight into the camera. His voice was cracked but clear. "We told you we wouldn't be forgotten. We told you not to come back. And now we remember." Back on the ship, the autopilot had activated. Without command. It had already sent the logs. Sent the footage. Sent the signal. The crew tried to override it, but their hands shook too much. Because the figure was no longer in the chair. And the walls of the station were beginning to hum. A code long thought extinct was pulsing from the core. Binary. Primitive. Raw. Ancient. Translated, it said. Project Warden, reactivated. Human Protocol, restore. The stars flickered outside the viewports. And from somewhere deeper in the dark, far beyond the edge of mapped space, came a second signal, this time not from the station. It wasn't just one figure in one chair. There were others. Dozens. Hundreds. Sleeping. Waiting. Remembering. And now that one had awoken, the rest would follow. The myth was never a myth. It was a warning. And it had just begun. They didn't know how long they'd been running. Time had unraveled inside the station. What had once been straight hallways now looped like something alive. Gravity pulsed in small bursts, like the beating of a sleeping heart. And the hum, it never stopped. Always in the background like a whisper right at the edge of hearing. The crew had split unintentionally. In the panic, cries of names echoed down corridors that swallowed sound. Only 4 remained together now, 2 engineers, the linguist, and a security officer whose rifle was already running dry. His hands trembled, not from fear of an enemy but from something worse. Something unseen. Every door they tried was locked. Every panel they pried open revealed only more darkness. The station was changing. Adapting. Becoming something else. Or perhaps, returning to what it once was. They found themselves in a room that hadn't existed before. It was clean. Cold. Bright. Unlike the rest of the station, this room was silent. Too silent. The hum stopped here, like whatever powered the presence in the rest of the structure refused to cross into this space. On the far wall, embedded in glass, was a display. It wasn't digital. It was analog. Spinning reels, scratched metal, a flickering light projecting moving images onto the surface of a translucent screen. A recording. Or a memory. It began playing the moment they entered. A man stood in front of a crowd. The setting was a ruined city, dust still hanging in the air. His uniform bore no insignia, but the people behind him, young, tired, defiant, wore expressions too human to fake. He spoke in an old Earth tongue, but the translator on the linguist's arm struggled. Some words had no match. Others echoed too loudly. "This is not our end. We are not gone. We are shadows, yes, but shadows of fire. When they write of us, let them know. Humanity was never conquered. We chose silence." The reel snapped. The image vanished. The engineer stepped forward, touching the dusty glass. They vanished on purpose? But why? The linguist asked. Why disappear just when the galaxy was opening up? Why hide their technology, their power, their existence? No one answered. Not yet. From the hallway, a noise, metal twisting like breath drawn through broken lungs. They turned, weapons raised, but nothing came. Only the hum returned, louder than before. Angrier. Like it knew they had found something not meant to be seen. They moved again deeper into the core. No one said it out loud, but they knew. If they stayed still, the station would consume them. Every turn brought them closer to the center. The walls began to show carvings, not in alien languages but in human ones. Etched by hand, each one a message. We tried peace. They came anyway. We told them not to follow. If you find this, you're too late. The linguist ran her fingers over the last one, her lips trembling. These weren't warnings for enemies. These were, for us. For any humans that came after. But we're not human, said the engineer quietly. That sentence sat heavy in the room. No one knew where Earth had gone. The Terran colonies had faded from record. DNA from the human race had mixed, diluted, or vanished entirely. What remained were myths, fragments, and tales passed down like ancient spells. Many species had tried to claim humanity's legacy. Their art, their science, their fire. But none of them felt it. That was the difference. Whatever was waking in this station, it didn't see them as inheritors. It saw them as thieves. The hum became a pulse now. A beat. Steady. Heavy. The linguist collapsed to her knees, gripping her skull. They're speaking again, she gasped. Not with words. With memory. The others tried to pull her up, but her eyes were distant. Blazed. Lost in something only she could see. Cities, she whispered. So many cities. Falling. A sky full of ships burning red. People screaming. Then silence. So much silence. And beneath it all, rage. The pulse stopped. And for a moment, everything was still. Then the wall behind them cracked just slightly. Enough to let a thin beam of light pour through. Not the pale artificial light of the station, but something golden. Warm. They turned. One by one. A new door had formed. No controls. No panels. Just old steel, hand-welded and marked with the image of a broken planet and a single word burned into the metal. Terra. The security officer stepped forward, his voice hoarse. I don't think we're just on a station anymore. They opened the door. The room inside stretched out endlessly. It wasn't made of metal or wires. It was earth, trees, sky. A reconstruction. A perfect simulation, or maybe something more. A memory made real. They were standing in a forest under a sky with 2 moons. Birds flew overhead. Wind whispered through the leaves. And in the center of a small clearing stood a monument. A single obsidian stone. Tall, cold, covered in names. Names no one had ever read in 1,000 years. Names that matched no galactic registry. No modern lineage. But the linguist began to cry. I know them, she said, breath catching. Not from my own memory. From theirs. She pointed to the air where faint images shimmered. People laughing, holding each other, falling, bleeding, rebuilding, hoping. A human life lived again and again. One of the engineers dropped to his knees. This place, this was their goodbye. He was right. The holograms pulsed and a voice filled the air, different from before. Warmer. Sadder. If you're here, then the myth failed. If you're here, then someone came looking. We asked to be left alone. We buried ourselves so you could forget. But we were never good at being forgotten. The trees trembled. The sky flickered. You are not our children. You are not our kin. But you carry our noise, our curiosity, our defiance. And now that you've heard us again, we must return. The ground split. From beneath the monument, the earth opened like a wound, revealing stairs. Stone. Cracked. Leading down into the dark. The hum returned, louder now, resonating through bone and blood. They had no choice but to descend. They entered a tomb. Not one of the dead, but of the waiting. The walls were lined with pods. Hundreds. Thousands. Each held a figure. Human. Preserved. Sleep. Ageless. And at the center, standing beneath a pillar of light, was the one from the chair. Awake now. He turned toward them, not with anger but with sorrow. You weren't supposed to come here, he said aloud. A real voice full of gravity. You weren't meant to remember. The linguist stepped forward, trembling. We didn't mean to. But you did, he interrupted. And now everything changes. He walked slowly as if every step carried the weight of centuries. His face was tired. Not cruel. Not cold. Just tired. They made us monsters, he said. The others, when they couldn't control us, when they feared our speed, our will, our unity. He gestured to the sleeping rows. We chose silence, not surrender. We left the galaxy to them. We erased our names. We became ghosts. Why? One of the engineers asked. Why go to such lengths to disappear? Because we couldn't win. Not without becoming them. He looked at them then, not at their clothes or tech, but into them. But now, you've opened the wound. Behind him, one of the pods flickered. Then another. Then 10. The tomb began to pulse with light. Slow. Then faster. They will feel us wake, he said. Who? Asked the security officer, stepping back. The man-human looked up. All of them. The stars shifted outside the station. Far across the galaxy, at the edge of every major trade route, old beacons began to blink. Ones thought long dead. Ones no civilization remembered building. And in distant war councils and planetary archives, a single signal was received. 3 words. Spoken in a voice no AI could replicate. Humanity has stirred. The galaxy paused. And somewhere deep in the dark, a very old enemy remembered the taste of fear. The first pulse knocked them to their knees. It didn't come from the man in the light. It didn't come from the tomb. It came from deep within the station, deeper than anything built by modern hands. A raw surge like the planet itself had shuddered. The lights above flickered, then dimmed. All systems died in an instant. Wrist displays, visors, sensors. Total silence fell. Then came the second pulse. This one was colder. Slower. Not an explosion, not a weapon. It was recognition. Something else had felt the awakening. Something vast. Watching. They felt it, whispered the human. His voice had changed, still steady but now laced with something sharp. Not fear. Readiness. The crew huddled together. No one spoke. No one breathed too loud. They weren't just seeing history anymore. They were standing inside it. And history, it seemed, had teeth. The man walked between the rows of sleeping humans, one hand trailing lightly across the pods. Some stirred. Some flickered with pale blue light. None opened. Who are you waking? Asked the linguist, voice raw. Your soldiers? The man stopped. For a long time he didn't answer. Then quietly. No. Our memory. One of the engineers stepped forward, desperate to understand. But, you could have stopped this. You had the tech, the weapons. Why disappear? Why hide and wait for someone like us to stumble in? He turned slowly. Because war isn't just fire. It's infection. And we were burning from the inside. The galaxy wanted us to burn fast. We chose slow. He walked past them toward a wall none of them had noticed before. It peeled away like skin, revealing a circular chamber. No lights. No power. Just a sphere hovering in the middle, smooth, black, alive. The man reached out. A spark leapt to his fingers. And the galaxy screamed. The stars above the tomb shivered, colors bending. Space itself flexed. Far across the sector, ships jumped out of hyperspace in panic. Navigation systems failed. AI cores collapsed into silence. Even the most advanced civilizations, those who had called themselves rulers in humanity's absence, felt something ancient reach through their networks. A name none of them had said aloud in generations. Humanity. The man spoke not to them but to the tomb itself. His voice was like thunder and prayer stitched together. We buried our pain in silence. We buried our rage in shadow. But you broke the quiet. So now we break the sky. The tomb shook. The pods began to open. Not all, just a few. Just enough. Figures stepped out. Men, women, soldiers, scientists, children. Real. Alive. Faces aged by sleep but untouched by time. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They remembered. One of them looked at the linguist. Her eyes, bright gray, locked onto hers, and something cold slid into the younger woman's heart. We trusted the silence to hold, she said. We were wrong. Outside the station something moved. Something massive. A shape too big to be a ship. Too slow to be natural. It emerged from behind the dying star, the one no species ever colonized. The one marked as cursed by old maps. A vessel. Human. No registry. No signal. Just presence. The security officer stumbled backward, rifle lowered. That thing's not supposed to be real. It's the size of a moon. The man didn't even look. Not a ship, he said. A vault. He looked up at the trembling ceiling. We built them when the stars turned on us. We scattered them. Each with a piece of us. Memory. Culture. Fury. His hand closed into a fist. This one woke first. The rest will follow. The linguist, heart pounding, tried to speak, but her voice broke. You're going to fight again. He didn't answer. Another pulse rocked the station. But this time it wasn't human. From the void a response came. Something old. Something angry. The station's external feed blinked on, showing a fleet entering the system. Not one species. Multiple. United. Different colors, designs, tech. Their only shared trait? They were armed. And they were afraid. The AI controlling the feed began translating intercepted chatter. Signal confirmed. Myth origin, active. All units proceed to extermination protocol. The crew watched, breathless. The man-human watched too, his face unreadable. They never wanted us back, he said. Even after all this time. They still fear the sound of our name. The security officer turned to him, finally finding his voice. If you go to war again, the galaxy won't survive it. He nodded slowly. That's not my decision. Then whose is it? He stepped aside. Behind him, the newly awakened humans stood in rows. And among them was a child. Small. Fragile. No armor. No weapon. Just wide, alert eyes. The child stepped forward, staring at the crew. At the screen. At the ships arriving above. Is it time? She asked. The man kneeled beside her. Not yet, he whispered. But soon. The engineer looked at the ships. At the crew. At the people waking up below. And he said what none of them wanted to ask. What happens if they fire first? The man smiled, not with joy but with something deeper. Regret. Memory. They will. Then the lights above shifted. The vault in orbit began to open. Not like a door. Like a wound. Beams of energy arced across the black. Structures unfolded. Not weapons, bridges, platforms. Frameworks older than every known empire. And in the center, something lit up. A pulse. Just one. Then another. A heartbeat. They think we're monsters, the man said. But they never understood what we really are. The linguist turned toward him, voice shaking. Then what are you? He looked at her. And in his eyes, fire. Human. The vault in orbit continued to unfold like some forgotten god stretching after a long slumber, its skeletal arms reaching into space with slow, deliberate movement. The crew on the station watched in silence, breath shallow, skin prickling with cold sweat. What hovered above them wasn't a ship in the traditional sense. It was a memory made solid. A relic forged by a species that had chosen disappearance over domination. Until now. The awakened humans below did not speak, yet their presence was deafening. Something deep and unspoken passed between them, like a language made of emotion and instinct. Each movement, each glance carried weight. A shared grief. A buried fury. They didn't just remember their past, they carried it in their bones. The child looked up at the vault through the transparent ceiling. She reached her hand toward the light, and for a moment, her fingers seemed to glow with the same energy that pulsed from the ancient structure above. It answered her, not with sound but a tremble in gravity. Like the universe itself had just taken a breath. The security officer turned away, jaw clenched, gripping the handle of his useless weapon. There's something wrong. It's too quiet. The engineer nodded. Yeah. Where's the attack? That fleet should have fired by now. The linguist checked the flickering feed. They're holding position. Broadcasting scans. Like they're trying to confirm something before engaging. That was when the second twist came. From the edge of the star system, a second fleet jumped in. Bigger, older, and human. But not from the vault. Not from the tomb. This fleet bore different markings. Patched hulls, irregular designs, tech decades behind what the vault carried. They moved with hesitation, formation sloppy, like a group that hadn't trained together in years. And then the transmission started. Human voices. Different accents, different dialects. Some calm. Some shaking with disbelief. But all of them, human. This is Resistance Cell Delta 9. If you're receiving this, we're alive. We've always been alive. The station went silent again, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was disbelief. The man at the center, the one who had awakened first, froze. His eyes lifted toward the feed, expression hardening. The linguist stepped closer, confused. What? Who are they? He didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice that sounded more like steel than sorrow, he said, they weren't supposed to exist. More ships jumped in. More human voices. From every corner of the galaxy, hidden enclaves began broadcasting. Old Earth colonies. Long-lost sleeper ships. Underground networks thought wiped out by early wars. They weren't myths. They weren't forgotten. They had survived. Without vaults. Without silence. Without the plan. One broadcast came through clearer than the rest. An older woman dressed in patched gear, face scarred, eyes burning. To whoever opened the vault. We didn't forget. We refused to. You abandoned the stars. We never did. The child took a step back. The man, the first one, lowered his head. They think we ran, he whispered. And did you? Asked the engineer. His eyes snapped up. We sacrificed everything to stop becoming monsters. They stayed, and became them. The tension in the room thickened. The newly awakened humans shifted uneasily, unsure. The air felt heavier. The linguist tried to reason, stepping between them. You both survived. That's what matters. You were fighting for the same thing, just in different ways. No, he said, shaking his head slowly. They broke the silence. But not to remember us. To replace us. Another tremor rocked the station. The vault above shimmered. One of its massive limbs shifted toward the new human fleet. The child's voice was barely a whisper. They're waking the fire. The vault's outer surface began to pulse again, but this time, it wasn't memory being activated. It was weaponry. Ancient. Reluctant. But real. Outside, the new human fleet panicked. The woman from the earlier transmission spoke again, now furious. Vault systems are arming. Do not engage. We are not the enemy. But it was too late. One of their smaller ships jumped forward, perhaps to stop the vault, perhaps to warn. The vault responded on instinct. A pulse beam, barely visible, lashed out. There was no explosion. The ship simply vanished. The security officer took a step back, eyes wide. That wasn't an attack. That was a reset. The man confirmed it. Vaults were never designed to conquer. They were designed to cleanse. To erase the infection. Infection? The linguist asked. You mean other species? He shook his head. No. Humans. We were always the danger. The awakened humans around them began whispering, emotions surfacing. Doubt. Anger. Grief. They hadn't expected this. They were prepared for war against the galaxy, but not against their own kind. A third signal cut in. One no one expected. Not from the vault. Not from the fleet. From Earth. Real Earth. A beacon buried so deep in the planet's core that no scan had ever found it. Now it was active. A woman's voice spoke. Soft. Calm. Familiar. To those who remember, and those who never knew, humanity never truly vanished. We fractured. We hid in vaults. We hid in systems. We hid inside ourselves. Her voice trembled slightly. But now that we've found each other again, we have a choice. The vault began to power down. Slowly. The man's face hardened. That message was locked. Meant to trigger only if the vault and the survivors reconnected. The linguist turned to him. So now what happens? His answer came with pain in his voice. Now, a humanity must decide what version of itself deserves to survive. Behind them, the child walked forward, her eyes not on the vault or the sky, but on the rest of them. On the crew. The outsiders. The witnesses. And she spoke without fear. Maybe it's not their choice. Maybe it's ours. The ceiling cracked. A new fleet approached. Not from any known species. Not human. Not from this galaxy. Something had been listening to the signals. Something older than memory. Something that had once fought humanity before they vanished. And now, it was coming to finish the job. The man stepped back, looking to the sky. The war we thought we escaped followed us. No one spoke. The sky burned white. And everything began again. The stars above the vault flickered like dying embers, distorted by the massive arrival of something no one had planned for. An enemy that didn't send warnings or broadcasts. It didn't care for treaties or myths. It wasn't here for power. It was here to erase. It moved like a black tide, swallowing light. Ships the size of cities glided into formation, silent and perfect. They didn't speak in language, they spoke in absence. The void bent around them. Scanners couldn't read them. The fleet wasn't part of the galaxy's history. It had existed outside of it, watching. And now it was answering. The first beam struck before anyone could act. Not at the vault, not at the awakened humans. It hit one of the new human fleet's cruisers. Clean, surgical, erasing the hull in silence. No fire, no sound, just gone. Thus, the feed from Earth crackled again, louder now, desperate. Unknown, hostile. Not native. Not in archives. Vault records, pre-galactic contact. It's them. They found us again. Inside the station, panic rose. The awakened humans stared at the sky, frozen. They recognized the design, the pattern. Not from memories, but from nightmares passed down like old hymns. The man, the first who'd awoken, stepped toward the glass. He whispered something no translator could catch. But the look on his face said enough. It was rage. Not against the enemy above, but against time itself. They hadn't waited long enough. Silence hadn't been enough. We buried our fire, he said aloud. They came to dig it up. The vault above responded. Its limbs stopped opening. Its pulse dimmed. It closed in on itself. The linguist looked up, confused. Why is it shutting down? Because it knows, he said. It was built for a galaxy full of arrogant species and fragile threats. But this. He pointed toward the enemy fleet. This is what ended us the first time. The child moved forward again, but her expression was different now. Not wonder. Not fear. Understanding. I remember them, she said. Not with words. With feeling. They don't fight like us. They erase us. And she was right. The new fleet didn't fire in volleys. It sent out pulses that disrupted thought, bent reality. Ships from both human sides began to shake, flicker, vanish, disconnected from space. The man turned back to the crew. We need both sides. No. There's no time for proving who's more human. The engineer nodded. We'll send a signal. Try to unify the fleets. But the linguist stepped forward, eyes wide. No, it's not going to work. They're not going to listen. We need something else. Something they can't ignore. Her voice cracked as the words left her lips. We have to activate the core. Everyone turned to her. The vault's core, the deepest system, wasn't a weapon. It was a decision maker. The last program Earth ever trusted. It carried protocols no living person had ever dared use. Are you saying we let the vault choose? The security officer asked. No, she said. I'm saying we all choose. Together. One signal. One voice. Everyone. From the tomb. From the fleet. From Earth. The vault pulsed, still closed. The man stepped to the center of the room. He raised his voice, not as a soldier, not as a leader, but as a human. This is a call to every survivor. Every child of Terra. Every descendant of our fire. You don't need to be born of Earth to carry its soul. If you remember the name human, then stand with us now. The crew activated every relay. Broadcast on every band. Voices rose, broken, scattered, layered in emotion. All human. Some crying. Some screaming. Some just whispering the name Earth. And then, the vault opened again. But this time not with weapons. With a message. A single beam of golden light shot into the stars. Not at the enemy. At the humans. All of them. It linked the fleets. The tomb. The hidden enclaves. One signal. One sync. And through that link came images of Earth before the fall. Of unity. Of laughter. Of resistance. The pulse grew stronger. Then came the final transmission. From the vault itself. Humanity, confirmed. Fragmented. Reunited. Fire restored. The vault ignited. Not in destruction, but illumination. Every corner of the system lit up. Satellites dormant for centuries blinked alive. Relays powered by starlight roared back into function. An ancient field of protection, the last hope of the species, activated. And the enemy? They felt it. The void around them twisted. One ship turned. Then another. They didn't retreat. They hesitated. And in that hesitation, came the final twist. From the deepest part of the galaxy, beyond any chart, a final signal entered the field. Another vault. One no one had known existed. Its markings weren't human. Not entirely. They were hybrid. Human and something else. The linguist stared at the data, mouth open. They made peace. The man didn't answer. But his silence spoke volumes. In the last days before Earth went silent, a group had done the impossible. They had reached them. The enemy. And they had made something new. Not war. Not silence. But understanding. And now, it was coming back. The enemy ships stood still, the light from the hybrid vault washing over them. And for the first time in all of galactic history, the void blinked. The enemy vanished. Not destroyed. Gone. The vaults quieted. The sky stilled. And what remained was us. Scattered. Flawed. Surviving. But still human. The man turned to the crew, his face no longer heavy with the weight of war. Just peace. You wanted the myth, he said. Now you carry it. The child smiled at the stars. We're not a story, she said. We're a beginning. And in the silence that followed, Earth pulsed once more. Alive. The stars were still now. After all the chaos, the silence felt too wide, too deep, like everyone was holding their breath. The vault hovered quietly above the station, its pulse slower, steadier. Not dead. Not dormant. Just resting again. But it was different this time. It wasn't hiding anymore. It had nothing left to protect. No more secrets. Just memory and what came next. Inside the station, the crew stood with the awakened humans. No one spoke for a long time. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said with action, with sacrifice, with silence. The man, no longer just a myth, no longer just a figure from an ancient sleep, sat down on the edge of the viewing deck. He watched the stars like he was looking for someone, or maybe waiting for something. The child stood next to him, quiet, small, but carrying the weight of centuries. The linguist walked over slowly, her mind still spinning. Did we win? The man didn't look away from the stars. No one wins. We just kept the fire going. She sat beside him. Then what now? He was quiet for a long time before answering. We have to live with what we were, and choose what we become. That's always been the hardest part. Outside, the hybrid vault slowly retreated into the darkness, its engines barely making a sound. It hadn't come to fight. It had come to show that something impossible had been done. That someone, somewhere, had reached into the enemy and pulled out understanding. No one knew who they were. Not yet. The data hadn't finished processing. But the message was clear. Humanity's silence hadn't just protected the galaxy. Somewhere it had changed it. The engineer, exhausted, leaned against a wall. He watched the stars blinking gently outside. So, they weren't just waiting to wake up. They were waiting for a reason. The man finally turned. Silence isn't surrender. It's a chance. A chance to do better next time. The security officer looked at the pods, most of them still unopened. Are you going to wake the rest? The child answered before the man could. Not yet. They're not ready. He smiled softly at her, then nodded. They were given peace. If we wake them, it should be because peace is no longer possible. But maybe now, maybe it is. The crew made contact with the human fleet, the ones who'd never gone silent. Their leaders were cautious, skeptical, but no longer hostile. The vault's reaction, the hybrid signal, the retreat of the enemy, it changed everything. A meeting was arranged. On neutral ground. The vault transmitted coordinates for an orbiting moon near the edge of the system. A simple place. Unremarkable. But it had air. And gravity. And silence. There, under a pale sky, representatives from both human sides sat across from one another. Some wore old armor. Others wore no uniform at all. But for the first time in 1,000 years they spoke. Not in fear. Not in pride. In hope. The linguist stood between them. She translated when needed. Mostly she just listened. The man who had awoken first did not attend. He said his part was done. His place was with the vault, with those still sleeping. But he sent a message. We did not vanish because we were weak. We vanished because we were strong enough to walk away. Now that you've found us, let's not waste the second chance. The child delivered it herself. She walked up to the delegates, eyes full of wonder and fire. She didn't speak like a soldier or a politician. Just a human. They thought we were gone, she said. But maybe, we just needed to be remembered by the right people. The moon meeting ended without shouting. Without weapons. Just quiet nods and a shared promise. Reconnection. Not with power. With story. The vault agreed to share records. Not weapons. Not command protocols. Just history. It was the only thing that couldn't be remade. The human fleet in return sent recordings of their own. Lives lived in hiding, in fear, in fire. Stories of those who kept the name human alive without vaults, without tech, without even knowing if anyone else still existed. Both sides cried. And then they laughed. Because it turned out that the stories were the same. Different places. Different faces. But the same emotions. The same will. The same refusal to disappear. Back on the station, the crew prepared to leave. The system was marked as protected now. Not quarantined. Not forbidden. Just honored. The engineer packed slowly, still staring at the carved symbols on the walls. Words written in human hands, promises from the past. He looked at the vault one last time. We almost didn't make it, he whispered. The man walked beside him. But you did. Why me? The engineer asked. Why us? The man shrugged gently. Because you were curious. Because you listened. They shook hands. Not as soldiers. Not as leaders. Just humans. The linguist stayed a bit longer. She stood by the child at the edge of the viewing deck. They watched the hybrid vault disappear into the dark. Do you think it'll come back? She asked. The child nodded. When we're ready to understand what it really means. She looked up at the stars, then added, everything out there has a story. Even the things that scare us. Maybe especially them. The linguist smiled. You speak like you've lived longer than all of us. I've just been dreaming longer, the child said softly. Earth's beacon remained active. Not as a warning. As a welcome. Other species began to notice. Not just governments. Not just councils. Ordinary travelers. Explorers. Historians. They came with questions. They came with fear. They came with hope. and they left with stories. The myth of humanity wasn't a myth anymore. It was a scar, yes, but also a reminder. That silence could be power. That fire could be buried and still burn. That even after everything, a name could matter. One of the final messages broadcast by the vault before going quiet again was short. Just one sentence. A memory. We were never gone. You just stopped looking. The crew returned to the wider galaxy, changed. Not just by what they saw, but by what they carried now. The security officer started teaching again back at the academy. But this time he didn't just teach tactics. He taught history. The engineer took a posting near the edge of explored space, helping chart new systems, always looking up. And the linguist, she wrote. She wrote everything. Not with fancy words. Not with embellishment. Just the truth. The story of how humans returned, not with guns but with memory. Not with orders but with questions. Her book traveled further than any of them expected. Translated into 100 languages. Uploaded onto trade beacons. Played in classrooms. Recited in songs. Because it wasn't just a story about humanity. It was a story about what it meant to be forgotten, and remembered, and what it meant to forgive the silence. In the end, humanity wasn't the fire or the silence. It was the choice between the two. And now that choice was in the hands of every living soul who heard the story. The vault slept. The stars listened. And across the galaxy, where the name human had once been spoken only in myths and caution, now it echoed in stories told softly in the dark. We were never the center of the galaxy. We were just the spark. And sometimes a spark is enough.